It's been 2 years since I did a tier ranking of the base salaries for the United squad, as last year's dire campaign meant there was pretty much all of them that would have gone down as a waste of money. I don't take into account bonuses or extras here, just assume that each one gets a lot more than what's stated. So just to refresh, this is not a review of the season or anything like that. I already did a video like that recently, and there's a link in the description below if you want to watch it. Instead, this is a ranking based on the players' salaries and whether they deserve the wages they received for the individual performance over the season. Therefore, it can be quite relative as to where the player ends up. For instance, if a player's had an average season but their salary is quite low, they'll probably end up higher than a player who's had a good season but with an astronomical base income. Also, I've taken into account how large the player's salary is in comparison to teammates. Anyway, you'll soon pick it up as we go through the squad, but remember, I may have to be harsh. If someone's had an injury or didn't play, even if it's not their fault, they may get a lower ranking. As you can see, there are 6 tiers and they're all pretty self-explanatory, and so I'm not sure I'd need to go into it any deeper. Anyway, let's get going, and we'll start with Diallo. Diallo was on loan at Sunderland last season, so his ranking is defaulted directly into the loan category, but it's just a bit more information. He's on around 30 grand a week, although I can't tell you if the Black Cats paid a whole lot of it. Regardless, they got their money's worth as their Ivorian played 42 matches, scoring 14, as they just missed out on promotion via the playoffs, and so here he's dropped in there. Next up is Antony, who spent his first season at Old Trafford. The Brazilian is the joint 7th highest paid player at United with Marcus Rashford, both taking home a basic salary of 200 grand a week. However, they've had very contrasting seasons, as you know, and despite the Brazilian's 3 goals in his first 3 matches, fell short on a number of occasions. He took part in 44 games, scoring 8 and assisting a number of others, but this effort doesn't justify his high salary in my opinion, and so I will have to slot him into the overpaid tier. I wonder how many you'll disagree with that. On to Eric Bailly, and the Glass Ivorian went on loan to Marseille for the season, so again into the default loan category. But just for the record, he mainly struggled there and was sent off for a horror tackle, incurring a 7-match ban. He was also injured, of course, during the season. Bailly takes home 80 grand a week, so I'm glad we didn't have to pay it all. Standing skipper Bruno Fernandes has had the best season at the club since he joined and has not only comfortably stepped in as captain due to out of favour Harry Maguire spending much of his time on the bench, his creativity was amongst the best in the country last year. His goal scoring along with Rashford were the main outlets for our end result. He was involved in most matches last term, 49, and his 14 goals and countless assists mean that his 240 grand a week, the 6th highest in the squad, was supreme value this time around. Another rock in the middle of the park in the season just gone was the new boy Casemiro. The Brazilian has been many Reds player of the season for the influence he's had on the side and passion and steel he's brought. At the season's end, he was the 4th highest paid player at the club on £300,000 a week basic. He played about 80% of our games, coming into the season a bit late and missing 7 matches through suspension. And now here's the rub. Is his 15.6 million annual salary worth his services over the last season due to the fact he missed so many matches during the campaign? Yeah, I must put him in the supreme value tier. His impact has been too great for anything less. David DeGea was the highest paid member in the United squad for the 22-23 season, raking in a cool basic salary of 375 grand a week. Therefore, by the rules, he needs to have reflectively had an excellent season just to justify that kind of income, which he didn't. Yes, he won the Golden Gloves, but this, as I mentioned in the end of season video, is much an improvement in the defence as a whole as anything else. Despite his standard breathtaking saves, which only few can belittle, not many can defend his poor footwork and distribution, which is key in today's game. So I'm placing Dave in what looks like his final season for United in the overpaid tier, the highest paid player at the club. Did you know that Diogo Dalot gets 25 grand a week? Only Pellestri, Elanga and Tengi earn less than the Portuguese. And to rub salt into the wound, the fullback has had a very solid season where he's consistent at right back, or left back when needed, but also managed a couple of nice goals into the bargain. So for the money we paid for him, which is 10% of Antony Martial's salary, Diogo Dalot was supreme value in my book. And on to another new boy, Christian Eriksen. The Dane impressed before he got crippled by Andy Carroll against Reading in the Cup at the end of January. Thereafter he wasn't so effective. However, his 150 grand a week isn't a massive salary compared to his teammates, and so I'd say somewhere between good value for money and about right. If he'd scored more goals and had a better latter half of the season, he'd have been more than the about right tier that I am going to put him in. Next up, Fred. The Brazilian was involved in a massive 55 matches in the last campaign, scoring half a dozen goals. However, only around 40% of those 55 were starts, and he had pretty much a backseat in the proceedings due to the new signings and gaffer. He's on 120 grand a week, which again is about average, which is what he's been although I'm tempted to put him in the overpaid column. Yeah, here he goes. Youngster Alejandro Garnacho has been involved in 40 matches in his breakout season, but most have been off the bench. However, when he has entered the field of play late on, he's often had the ability to dictate the outcome with his precocious play. Still, just a kid, he only earns 50 grand a week. Jadon Sancho earns 7 times that amount. So I'm putting him into supreme value. Mason Greenwood gets 75 grand a week, and as he didn't play all season due to issues that you'll have an opinion on, but I won't go into, his wages have been a waste of money, and he's dropped into that tier accordingly. Dean Henderson was loaned out to Nottingham Forest before the boss even met him last season, or at least according to the man himself in that notorious interview. He did alright at the City ground, to be fair, and was number 1 before an injury in January put him out for the season. Victor Lindelof has been one of the many surprise packages from United's group of marginalised players who've had some sort of comeback in the season just gone. The Swedish skipper came to the forefront of the side when United captain Harry Maguire slipped down the pecking order, and later on when Lisandro Martinez got injured for the season, he looked far more assured playing alongside anyone other than Maguire and put in a series of solid displays in his 27 starts and 8 subs appearances. His 120 grand a week basic salary reflects his contribution to the cause, and so I think he's about right, and if he'd played a handful more games, I'd probably have even upped him a tier. Luke Shaw's been another of this squad's players who earned redemption after an awful season the year before. He's been very solid, contributed to the attack and has even played well at centre-back when called upon. The boss has got the best out of him so far. Due to his relatively reasonable salary of 150 grand a week, I can comfortably move him into that good value for money tier. Onto the skip, and I won't be giving out prizes for you guessing where he'll end up. I'm not going to be nasty. I believe the abuse he gets from many quarters is actually beyond the pale. However, he's been poor again this season, rarely injured, but just 16 starts and 15 sub appearances are the only contributions from the club captain last term. And even when he played, it came with an air of uncertainty and a lack of quality that's seen him move down to 5th choice centre-back by Ten Hag. All this coupled with the fact he's on just shy of £190,000 a week, or nearly £10 million a year, he has to be in the waste of money tier. Young left-back Tyrell Malacia has had mainly a decent season, albeit strewn with naivety which led to some bad consequences, but often he managed to get away with it. But as I said, he's been decent and brought good energy to the dressing room and the squad, earning a relatively low 75 grand a week. I think that's about right, and he goes in that tier. The enigma that is Antony Martial looks disinterested and immobile, or is on the treatment table, yet still managed to put the ball in the back of the net 9 times last season. We all know that he can do much better and hasn't been anywhere near his best. Now he's the 5th highest paid player at the club on a cool £250,000 a week. What a waste of money. On the opposite end of the scale, Lisandro Martinez earns 120 grand a week, the same as Fred, Donny van de Beek and Victor Lindelof, which is kind of criminal. The Butcher has added that steel and passion to the side in the defence which was severely lacking in the final year or two of the previous regime. As much as anyone, he's contributed to the most number of clean sheets in the Premier League last season. I don't think there's much debate on the Argentinian as being our first choice centre-back, the only drawback of the last campaign being that he was out with a metatarsal injury for the last 6 weeks of the season. Regardless, he's been supreme value. Scott McTominay was a bit part player last season, like Fred, making the vast majority of his 39 appearances as sub. However, when he did get his chance, he played well and was a decent squad player for Ten Hag to call upon. Also, the Scot is relatively moderately compensated by the club, earning around 60 grand a week. That's up from 20 grand a couple of years ago. And so due to that wage, he's about right and not far off good value for money. 21-year-old Facundo Pellestri is the second least well-paid player in the United squad at just 20 grand a week. The promising Uruguayan winger earned only 1 start and 9 subs appearances last term, but for the most part did well and has garnered a lot of interest from Reds like myself who hope to see more of him next season. As he earns so little despite his infrequent cameos, I think he's good value for money. Someone who is supreme value is the next man on the list, Marcus Rashford. Rash has exceeded almost everyone's expectations due to his massive contributions in the goals department, scoring 30 times in all competitions, almost a third of our total strikes. He played with a confidence and stature that he's not had in years, which, as I mentioned in my end of season video, is a great credit to him, the boss and his coaches. Even if his salary would double his 200 grand a week, you'd be hard pressed to give him anything but a supreme value tier ranking. I'm not going to spend much time on Ronaldo. I think his behaviour on and off the pitch from the start of the season to the beginning of the World Cup speaks for itself. 10 starts, mostly in the Europa League group stage, and half a dozen subs appearances, yielding a pair of goals isn't worth his touch under 258 grand a week, especially with his petulant behaviour, reacting to Ten Hag's decisions. Anyway, enough said. Waste of money tier for this season's efforts for the Portuguese. Marcel Sabitzer was a loanee from Bayern for a handful of months since the winter transfer window. He actually looked decent and even got 3 goals for his 18 appearances. However, he earned 210 grand a week and was injured for much of the end of the season. Also, despite those decent outings, he was also fairly incognito for others. So, considering his salary and what others are on, you may think it's unfair, but I consider our club's first Austrian red as overpaid. At the time of recording this, I now understand that David DeGea has now left the club, meaning that Jadon Sancho is the most handsomely paid player at the club on a whopping 350 grand a week. He's been lacklustre again. There have been moments of quality, but the England youngster wasn't even available to pick for months, and for the most part hasn't performed. So again, considering his staggeringly high wages, he has to be a waste of money on this list. Portuguese Alex Telles was on loan for the season, even incredibly and short-sightedly playing against us in the Europa League for Sevilla, which saw them triumph. He eventually went on to win the Europa League with them and goes into the loan category. On to Donny van de Beek. Last season was another It's the Story of My Life at Old Trafford episode. The out-of-favour Dutchman started 4 matches and was subbed in another 6 before a terrible tackle in a 3-0 win over Bournemouth just after New Year's Day saw him ruled out till the end of the season. It may be a bit heartless, but seeing as he'd had few appearances to that date, had made little impact in those games, even with a relatively average United salary of 120 grand a week, he has to be put in the waste of money tier, I'm afraid. Rafael Varane looked more like the centre-back we'd hoped for when he moved from Real Madrid 2 seasons ago. However, due to injuries again, he only played just over half the matches available this season, which for this tier ranking will count against him, with the basic being one of the highest at the club at £340,000 a week. Due to that, I would say that Varane is overpaid. If he'd played 80 to 90% or more of the matches, he would have had a far higher ranking. Against the odds, Wan-Bissaka made 28 starts and 6 subs appearances last season when he started playing regularly after the World Cup, initially just to fill in. Still not the finished article, he nevertheless showed his worth and played very solidly for the side and was quite reliable, considering he would have been part of many social media feeds at the beginning of the season to players who should leave the club. He deserves a pat on the back. As Wan-Bissaka only earns 90 grand a week, I think we've had good value for money from him last term. Almost finished, and now we're with the endearing Wout Weghorst. As a goal scorer, he wasn't great. 2 goals in 31 appearances, including 20 starts. The boss persevered with his countrymen for a run of 16 matches or so from signing him, and patriotic Reds like myself defending his deficiencies in finishing with other things he contributed, like linking up play, harrying defenders, giving 110% on the field, and being a linchpin in goals. However, also, we did need those goals we expected from him. That said, he cost us only a paltry £35,000 a week, 10% of Sancho's salary. I'm not picking on Sancho, it's just that what he's paid reflects nicely to what others are paid. So as far as the about right tier goes, that's a given for me. And you could argue that it was relatively good value for money. However, I am not one of those, and I'm putting him in the about right tier. Last one up is Antony Elanga, who may have slipped under the radar with many of us last season, despite the 21-year-old making 26 appearances, 7 of which were starts. The Swede was one of the bright spots of the awful season that had just gone before. However, his impact last season was that of the invisible man at best, which would have possibly have him consigned to the waste of money category if it weren't for the fact that he's by far the lowest paid player at the club on just 5 grand a week. The lad needs a new agent, that's for sure. Just to put that in context, picking on Sancho again, he earns 70 times that salary. So considering that, Elanga is in the value for money tier, as his wage is so low, it would make a mid-range championship player blush. So there you have it. You may call me out on this tier ranking being incomplete, as I haven't included Butland, Heaton, Jones and Williams. Well, you'd have a point, but I think it was beneficial to include them, as they only have a couple of appearances between them. Anyway, you can see all the salaries of all the players of the video from the 2 sources I used, football sites Capology and SportTrack. And once you've done that, let me know by posting in the comments below what you thought of the video and my choices. I'm sure there are a few controversial ones, then please like, share and subscribe. Thank you as always for your support.